Hello, I'm Dr. Bill, and welcome to Dr. Bill 360, where we explore the transformative world of organizational development, leadership, and beyond. Today, we're diving into the AI revolution with our special guest, Dr. Sue Tripathi. Are you ready to discover what AI means for our personal, professional, and organizational life? Let's begin this transformation on Dr. Bill 360. So, Dr. Tripathi, hello. How are you? And welcome to Dr. Bill 360. It's a pleasure to have you.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Bill. And it's lovely to be here. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yes. So, essentially, Dr. Tripathi, we're going to have two segments. One on understanding the AI revolution, as it were, and the professional and the organizational landscape, right? When we think about AI. So understanding the AI revolution. Dr. Tripathi, thank you for joining us again. And maybe AI revolution is a bit strong, right? Can you first start by explaining what AI is, what it's not, and if that's even the right question, right? Because there seems to be a lot of fuss about it. But what is it really?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Dr. Bill. You know, one of the things I think you will find if you Google the word artificial intelligence, just as a lay person, anyone who wants to go in and Google, you'll find different definitions of what AI is. You'll find different types of AI. You'll find different models of AI, different programs of AI. So those who are not dealing with AI in the way some of us are, who are in the space of data and AI, it becomes very difficult to frankly have a common definition. So the premise of artificial intelligence is that as humans, most of us, and if not all of us, are born with a brain. We do not call our brain as artificial, but a brain denotes intelligence, although we also know that the way we utilize our brain and varies. A child utilizes his or her brain differently than an elderly person, and so on and so forth. So,
Right.
artificial intelligence is nothing more than taking a machine, right? And a machine is not a human being, and you're using that machine to understand certain trends, certain patterns, and the reason that you're going to be using artificial intelligence, which actually are different types of artificial intelligence, this machine learning. There's natural language processing, which includes speech. There is which is there's generative AI, conversational AI, there's cognitive AI that maps your brain. So the different types of AI. AI doesn't only mean machine learning, but the
Okay.
most common way of thinking about AI is that it is the ability of a machine to understand the world around you, the world around them. And you learn from that and you make certain decisions. Now, we call it artificial because, again, they're not humans. We're training the machine to think a certain way. The thing that we have to be very careful about is that when we are thinking of artificial intelligence and then when we are training a machine, we basically have all kinds of simulating models, for example, that approximate our human brain, right? Or our human intelligence, not the brain. And so the goal is to have a computer enhanced learning, reasoning, and perception that will help us in decision making. And the second part of it is we can take large amounts of data and we can scale that data so that when we are creating a particular model, we can make it much faster. So one of the outputs that comes out of it and the outcome that we are trying to achieve, the output is actually we're trying to get a model that is much speedier. The outcome that we're trying to get from that speed, of course, is hopefully we'll get to the markets, sooner, and we can get to financial revenue or profitability, or identify ways to cost reduce, streamline processes, reduce redundancies. So there's a level of
Uh-huh.
automation, there's a level of validity, there's a level of feasibility, there's a level of a huge big issue around quality, and then scalability. And it is the
Yeah, but you
scalability. that
I'm
helps
sorry.
an organization move forward? Go ahead.
I'm thinking of the average person. I always think of my mother when I ask questions like this. Sometimes I think about my mother, right? She won't even get on Facebook, Um, uh, so how does that sound to her? Why do we need it? I didn't need it. I don't need it. I mean, the average person might say, okay, so what does that mean to me?
Yeah, excellent
It,
question.
yeah.
If you think about it, and I love that you brought your example of your mother, because no one really needs to be in the realm of data AI as a professional, because data and AI surrounds you every single day, especially data. You're making decisions. You go to a retail store based on your budget. You decide whether you want to go to the high end store, the middle end store. You're making those decisions based on information, based on data, right? So
Okay.
knowingly or unknowingly, we do that. The premise
Right.
of AI is that I make a lot of those decisions based on my data. So my data should be really good. The quality of the data should be really good. So let's use
Right. Right.
your mother as an example. Um, your mother, who's not on Facebook, by the way, I'm not on Facebook either. Um, and that's very, intentional. Nothing against Facebook. But the premise is that, do you want something that will make someone come to your doorstep if you want a delivery,
Right.
a
Right.
food package or something like that? Now, there are delivery stores, people who come. Now, pretty soon, it could be that a robot comes and gives you that delivery. And how do I do that? I do that
Okay.
because I have trained my model to do that. From a mother's perspective, maybe she really perhaps may or may not care whether it's a human being. She may be amused that a
Right.
robot is coming and ringing her doorbell.
Right. Right.
But from a business point of view, I have saved
Okay.
certain costs where I can redeploy the human being to do something that's a little bit more complex, that actually utilizes the human brain, because I
Okay.
haven't created yet an artificial intelligence model and mapped it to the brain, which for those higher order complexities, right? For those higher order tasks. So, in simple terms, another example would be, in the past, we would call, and we would hear a human being on the other end. How can I
Yeah.
be of
Yeah.
help to you, right?
Right. Right.
Those are now tasks that are not only automated, because we know that even if there are errors in those tasks, it doesn't impact, the financial, or you and I from a health perspective or from a financial perspective. It's not really impacting the customer that's detrimental to the customer. So these are called lower level tasks that, even if there's some level of error, I can have an AI, or I can have a virtual assistant talk to you and say, Dr. Bill, do you want to schedule your appointment with the dentist today? Let me do that for you, right? And so that's faster and speedier for the business. You're fine with it. However, if you want to get a referral to an to your orthopedic surgeon, you want to talk to a specialist, and that's where you want to talk
Right.
to a
Right.
human being. So there are various aspects where, whether we recognize it or not, AI has definitely filtered into a personal space, not just our professional
Yeah.
space. And we have accepted it without even knowing, because it's advantageous to all of us. So I loved what you asked, because in simplistic terms, no one really needs to have a correct definition of AI, as long as they
Right. Okay.
understand that they are actually part of this journey.
So then that leads me to my next question. Then, how would you describe your role, right, as an AI leader in shaping this narrative, and what does it mean in the context of, your work in technology and maybe the future of living with AI?
Yeah. So, Dr. Bill, the one thing that when you made your introduction and you said personal, professional, organizational, right?
Right.
So that is very, very important, because in your work, in the field that you are in the work that you have, that you are contributing to, it is about creating a space for bringing talent together, recognizing
Okay.
that talent both from a personal perspective, for organizations from a professional perspective, and then, professional and organizational, right? But remember that the unit is still the individual. We are the
Okay.
individuals who are also professionals. We are the individuals who also make up the institution or an organization. Collectively, we then build a culture. So I like your question about as an AI tech leader. The
Okay.
fundamental thing is if you take away the word AI and tech, the word is
Okay.
leadership. And
Okay.
leadership would denote personal, professional, organizational capacity that you are bringing to the table, that you are hopefully honing skills in and around you, and that you are also in this learning journey where you're looking internally but also externally. And external resources through thought leadership, through conferences, through articles that you've read, books that you may have written or heard from, podcasts, you are constantly learning. So, and the definition, according to me, as I wouldn't say in definition, the role of an AI tech leader is to take all these different aspects that you're constantly, surrounded with, and distilling it in a way where if you need to be very technical and your audience is technical, you are responding to what that technical audience is thirsty for, versus you're also talking to a business audience and they frankly couldn't to some extent couldn't care less whether it's NLP, whether it's machine learning, whether it's they just care that it's
Yeah.
business and that they're going to make money. And then there are other people in between who just go, I really don't care that much about data and AI. The data and AI folks live on that side of the street. I live on this side of the street. We belong to the same organization, but I really don't care about that much, with all due respect, because that's what they do. So it's the they versus us as an AI leader that I think I want to break down those silos, because the silos are all again in our brain. I don't need to be an expert, a technical expert, or a business expert, but what I need
Okay.
to do is allow people to feel free and be in a spot where they are fearless in asking a question on a subject that they may or may not know about, but that
Okay.
they know may help them in the jobs that they are doing. And that is the most critical aspect of it. It is human nature to say that until and unless I feel the impact of it or I have a need for it,
Yeah.
I don't have a need to learn about that, right? And the
Yeah.
one
That's
thing that we
that's.
all,
Talk about
yeah,
that some more. Talk about
yeah.
that some more, because the asking questions. So, what did you say now about that? Repeat that again about.
So I'm saying that it's basically it boils down to whether or not you're going to embrace change. Think about AI as a shiny new telephone that was introduced in the late 1800s, where there were literally people, there are movies about this, where people looked at that shiny object and said, I don't know, but I'm not touching that, right?
Right.
And then 30 years later, they were very curious, and now you had homes that had telephones, and then you had telephone operators. And now we have evolved to where telephones are just, everywhere. And all across the world, we have mobile phones and we have pictures and we rely on Google to tell us where to go. So
Right.
maps are now redundant, right? Because we rely on Google. So think about AI similar to that. We are in the very early stages of a massive revolution, and we are afraid that our jobs are going to go away, or we are
Yeah.
afraid that we are at that stage in our life where we just go, 5 more years and I'm going to retire. I can get away by not learning. But the reality is, you may get away by not learning, but it's there in your house, right?
Yeah.
So you may as well take advantage, frankly, and start thinking differently and saying, I only have 5 years. I've got all these smart people around me. I don't need to be fearful. My job is going nowhere. So let me understand the basics, because when I retire, instead of looking at something as a shiny new object, I know what that shiny new object can do for me. And I can put parameters around it to say, I don't need to know more than this. This is enough for me. After all, I'm
Yeah.
not going to be a data AI guru. And it's that I think an AI leader needs to assess the room, assess the
Okay.
readiness of that organization, assess the readiness of the professionals around them, whether they're in data AI or not, assess the individual capacity of a person to absorb, because not everybody, it's not going to be, easy for everybody, but then distill it
Right.
into a language. If you want to bring the entire organization along with you in this journey, make it simple, make it bite-sized, and tell them why you think it is of value to them, and let them reflect and start asking you questions. And that's more internal. So you're doing, in a nutshell, you're doing organizational development. You're also doing change management. You're also
Right.
assessing the temperature and the pulse of the people that are working with you in that enterprise. But then you're also taking that same thought process outside with your external folks, with your clients, and assessing that too. Because it's impossible for anyone to
Seems like a
say,
lot.
I understand those clients' needs because I had a chat with them. You don't. You don't live in those clients' shoes.
Right. Sounds like a lot. Um, thank you. Thank you for those answers. So let's talk a little bit more about defining AI. Let's narrow this down for people who just had a small understanding in your role in. But let's talk about the AI. What is it and the impact? So could you discuss, Doc, the different types of AI, like narrow AI, general or generative? I heard you use these terms, right, in their practical application today, right? Some people might say, so I don't care. But my father's one of his favorite things to say is, I don't care, I don't care, I don't care, right? Okay, so what? So give me this. So what? AI, narrow,
Yeah.
generative.
So I think when you get into what are the different types of AI, you're definitely getting into a realm where people who may or may not be using AI today in their regular work, they're seeing that AI is around them in their business, right? Again, to an average person who is not in that field, whose business is not that, who's nowhere around it, I don't know how much they will care about, what is a functionality AI and what is a capability AI. So let's first talk about capability AI, which is what you talked about, which is narrow AI. So narrow AI is very predefined. It doesn't have any past history. It's very focused on a particular area. So for example,
Okay.
I can, I'm agnostic of any company. I've worked with large companies, large multinational companies, etc. I'm not speaking on their behalf. This is just my thought leadership. So if you think about it, like IBM had the Deep Blue, where that machine beat the chess player, right? So that's
Okay.
very narrowly defined. It has a specific, and it's also called narrow or weak AI. Then you have what is called general AI. General AI is much broader. We're not there yet in terms of full application of it. We are still trying to understand and teach and learn and apply that to the human brain. I referred earlier to cognitive AI, mapping the human brain completely to understand. But then everybody's brain is different. So you've got to then say, can I generalize it, right? So, and there is a lot of fear because one can
Oh.
suppose that I've generalized something, but to date, at least in the US and in most parts of the world, we don't have a common AI standard, that we don't have any regulation. We have AI ethics, we have fair practices, we have bias in AI, we have, but there is nothing that's going to hold you and I responsible if we go out and sell an AI solution. No one can actually come to us and say, you sold us something that only narrowly works for this part of the business, but you generalized it and you said it works for it works enterprise wide. So there is always this fear. And the fear is it could be used in some destructive ways as well, right? And so,
Yeah.
and it has, if you look at elections, you look at what is sent out in media, and it's very difficult for an average person to discern whether that's fake or not fake. How would they know that? So there is the pros and cons to this AI, and until and unless we have regulation that regulates and holds people, enterprises accountable for what is put out there, we'll continue to see this. But in the next 10 years, I'm fairly confident, whether it's EU or North America, wherever else, we'll have a set of standards and it'll evolve as we speak. So in a
You know,
nutshell, capability AI is basically your narrow AI, your general AI, and then what we call the super intelligence AI, right? So think
Yeah, I've heard of
about,
that. I've
you
heard of
know,
that.
and again, that we are again not there yet. You will hear instances or examples of where people are building something, but the application of that is not yet universal. And that is good because
Here's
it is,
something. Here's
go ahead.
something though. So narrow. I think of things like, for example, what is it? The grammar check, Grammarly, right? I think of stuff like that. Grammarly. People say, "Oh no, I don't use AI. I don't use." I said, "Do you use Grammarly?" And they said,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's different. That's different." But I thought you
Yeah.
were against AI.
Yeah.
See, people are using AI and don't even realize that they're using
Correct.
it, right? You know.
Correct.
So
Correct.
I thought that was interesting. They're like, "Oh, the sky will fall if you use AI." I said, "You use Grammarly, don't you?" Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting. But when you talk about a general AI and things like that, I think about if they're so scared of it, because here's this issue now, with Meta and using data, right, and things like that, and ethics and all this kind of stuff. I think about, okay, as humans, if you want to go sell lemonade, if you want to go sell whatever, no one try to regulate you for selling, other than you can't poison people and all. But but now, but now, when a AI wants to do it, now it's got to be a whole bunch of regulations. And what I was thinking about was this um, limiting Meta from training on data. They were saying, "Oh, that's plagiarism," blah blah blah. I said, "Okay, so when you go to school and learn, go to the library and use all that material growing up, right? Is that plagiarism?" "Oh no 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 no, that's different." And I would say, how is that different? The the AI is using the same library or taking in the same information you take in, but when you do it, it's okay. But when the AI does it, somehow it's wrong. You know. Anyway, that leads me to my next question here.
So
Right? What are some?
if I may just, add to what you said. So the
Yeah.
fundamental difference, and that's a very good example, a very concrete example, is when I went to school, for example, we didn't have AI, right? At least I didn't have AI. AI came much
Right.
later. AI has been around. Let's just put it this way. AI has been around. It's being developed, and in the way we see it used widespread today, that's what I mean to say when I went to school, it wasn't this widespread, right? So there is a fundamental difference in two things. One is when we went and we picked up information from those books in the library, we were utilizing our brain to then formulate a response to a question or formulate and put together from the knowledge base that we aggregated to then respond and put to words and paper and pen or computer, right? Write down and
Okay.
jot our thoughts, right?
Right.
With AI, again, it's about speed. It takes all of that much quicker, much faster. So, in a way, you're resting your brain to say AI can do this. But here's the fundamental difference. Is AI giving you the knowledge base that you needed to have? So instead of looking at 10 books, it may be looking actually at 50. But those 50 are actually not relevant to the question because the
Okay.
machine is not necessarily specifically trained, it's not predefined. So if you keep it very broad, it'll bring everything else. And now you have what I call redundancies or things that are really not relevant. And so you will find you actually, this is a fun task for people to do. Ask a question, use ChatGPT, right? And ChatGPT will give you a lot of information, but one, that information is dated. That information actually takes extraneous information and puts in there that has little to no relevancy to what. And now, if you haven't really read what ChatGPT has said to you, you feel mighty good saying, ChatGPT did my homework or did my task, only to be questioned perhaps in front of some C-level people to say, how is that relevant to the topic that we were just asking? So I always say, there are pros and cons to everything. Yes, it's faster, but do you know that the sources from where that information is being pulled is valid? It's good, it's recent, it's relevant to what you are asking. Can you then reference it And so you be your own auditor in a way. You become your
Okay.
own auditor to audit before you go ahead and present it to anybody, especially if you're a key decision maker.
Yeah,
So the pros and
for
cons to
sure.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah, I always say he who frames the question frames the answer. So you complaining about the answer Chat GPT gave you, but you didn't frame the question correctly, or you could have
correct,
framed it better. You could
correct,
have framed it better.
correct, correct.
Yeah. So what misconceptions, right? We just talked about some of that with AI that you often encounter, right? For example, we just talked about the plagiarism and the world is coming to an end and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So you were kind of
So,
talking about that.
so I think we may have alluded it to in as part of our conversation. One is the fear that AI is going to come and take my job away, right? And so I'm not a data person. I'm not an AI person. I'm in HR. A lot of my information is being automated, and I'm at the lower rung of in the HR totem pole. And gosh, my job is going away. Your job is going nowhere. Your job will only go if you believe that you're going to be static in life and you're forever going to have that job. None of us
Okay.
want that. None of us want
Okay.
that, right? When we're younger, we understand we don't have experiences. We may not have the educational or the skill sets. So we go and upscale our skills. Either it's provided through work or we invest in ourselves and we go to school. So it's nothing more than that, right? So the first thing is to say, if you believe your job is going to go away, then I think your fear is going to come true. If you change
Got
your
it.
mindset to say, this is the job that I do, and what I do, I really do well. However, my next in the next 5 years, here are the three things that I want to learn that will also help me in improving my income. It's learning plus financial plus quality. The moment you put yourself out there and you acquire one or two technical skills, you don't need to be a data guru, you don't need to be an AI guru. But the moment you upskill, you are more marketable. That is just the nature of any
Yeah.
era that you take 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. We all had that fear, right? Now, the issue then is through that process, you'll find out whether or not you really want to get into the business of AI instead of fearing AI and make it enhance because people have fantastic brains. Most people on this planet, if not all, are very talented. What we are prone to do in business, in the business world, is we don't speak up because we are fearful. What are we fearful for? Of not about our new learning. We're fearful that we don't want to look stupid in front of what will people think of us, right? The fact that I don't know something, what if someone thinks, oh my God, I thought Dr. T knew a lot more. The moment you say the people around you are smart, some are much smarter than you, but the fact that you're asking a question shows curiosity, allows the other party to think, wow, I had not thought about that. What you asked earlier, how you framed the question, the iterative process of getting to the root of what it is that you're trying to seek. The moment you do that, you are allowing yourself to think, to expand your understanding and your memory and your knowledge. And this is what AI is about. AI is nothing where someone should fear and say, oh, I don't know that there were different types of data. Remember, AI, remember I said there's capability and there's functionality. And it is all, I mean, eventually, whether it's super intelligent AI, whether it's cognitive AI, it is about the human brain. So your brain is equally important to anyone in this universe as Dr. Bill and
Yeah.
Dr. Seuss. You are no less. So the moment you think differently, right? I think you open yourself up to saying, I tried that, I didn't like it, but at least I tried. Or I tried
You
it and I like this aspect of it, right?
you make me think. You brought back my mother again when you start talking about education and upskilling and stuff. I remember when my mother and father. Hopefully, they don't hear this, but when my mother and father were getting separated, my father said, "Well, I'll help pay for your education." She said, "Well, I didn't have none when I met you. Why do I need it now?" you know, which was kind of funny, but not funny. But she said, why do you think I need education, right? I didn't have it when I met you. So, and then the other thing you mentioned though about being smart in the room, people sometimes used to say that to me. Oh, well, like I had a GPA, high GPAs and graduation, this kind of stuff. Oh, you smart. I said, no, stop. Don't do that. They said, what do you mean? I said, if I allow you to call me smart, that means you don't have to work as hard as I had to work to get it.
Mm.
Okay. So I used to always say, stop calling me smart, right? No, but you're smart. I said, well, how much time did you spend last week in the library? Okay. How about how much work did you do? Homework. How much study? How much reading did you do? Oh, I don't want to talk to you. See, now they don't want to talk, right? Okay. But anytime somebody try to call me smart, I stop them and ask them, okay, so what are you doing? What are you working on now? See, then they don't want to talk.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Interesting,
It's
right?
a teaching
So,
moment. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So, what skills then, since we're talking about that, then, what skills should individuals maybe try to develop to stay relevant in an AI driven world like that, right? Maybe AI driven is an assumption. Maybe that's the wrong word. Data
Yeah,
driven or.
people, so that's another verbiage that I haven't understood. It's like we are data driven, we are AI driven. And there are
Yeah.
companies that are completely in the field of AI. That's all that they do. They innovate, they're doing deep learning, they're doing machine learning, they're doing NLPs, they're doing speech recognition, visual recognition. Yes, then you are very AI driven. But if you think about two common areas that any person on this planet absolutely needs to have. One is healthcare. We all at some point, unfortunately, we get sick, right? No matter
Yeah.
what our age or race or gender is. And we need money to survive, right?
Okay.
Period. We need food and clothing and all of that, but let's keep all
Yeah.
of that aside. We need money and our health. If our health is not good, we are dead. If we don't have money, we're not going to survive. Two very basic things in life. Now, these
Okay.
are not AI driven industries, but think about the time when
Hmm.
there was no ATM machine, right? There was a
Okay.
time when there was no ATM machine. You went to the teller, you spoke to the teller, you
Yeah.
had just like you went to the butcher shop,
Yeah.
right? Now we have automated that. Pretty soon, those ATM machines will be redundant, right? Pretty soon, it's all going to be, hey, we don't even need these buildings here anymore.
Oh.
These buildings are now converted into something else, right? Again, I'm going back to, and in healthcare, I'll tell you, healthcare people said,
Let me. When you mentioned the AI, and the machines, I had a flashback. I joined the Navy, the military in 1981.
uh-huh,
So every payday, we have to go to the, we get a go to the AI. We would go to HR or a different place. We would get our check. We get our check, and we had to go to the bank and stand in line,
yeah,
right? And
yeah,
those lines, the only time you can really go is somewhere around lunch. So these lines are very long, and you say, I got to get out, I got to get back. So you couldn't cash your check then. Maybe so this AI has been, and ATMs has been great because I was there in the
yeah,
80s
yeah,
going to stand in line. I
yeah.
don't know if you ever had to stand in line to cash your
Yeah,
paperwork, but I
no,
remember that.
absolutely. Now, you said, what are the skill sets or what do we need to be aware of I think the biggest advantage that we have is when we got access to the internet, not just mobile phone, but
Okay.
access to the internet, right? I can Google, I can search, I can verify if I want to, I can audit it myself and say, is this information right? Because I'm going to make a personal decision about it, right?
Right.
That's a
Okay.
huge advantage to us. So if you think about it, there's some very technical skills that one could have. You need to have Python and you need to know R and you need to know LLMs, which is large language models. That's for people who are in the business of dealing day in and day out with AI. They're building models within the banking sector or healthcare or supply chain or wherever, right? But if you're not that, right, what is it that you need to know about AI that makes you
Okay.
feel that I am good in this knowledge of what I know about AI? So, the first thing I would do is I just go and Google for myself, what does AI mean? And you'll find 5,000 different ways. But the core of it is
Okay.
what we discussed earlier. The second thing I'll ask myself is, why is this relevant to me in my personal and my professional life?
Okay.
And only I can answer that. Only you can answer that for
Okay.
yourself. And
Right.
thereby, instead of being fearful of this entire huge universe of what AI is, you narrow it down and say, this is all I need to know. In the next coming year, I'm going to educate myself through Google, through some courses, right? Whether it's Google, whether Microsoft. I'm not putting a plug for any one of these companies, by the way, but they're courses. You want to take certifications, basic things you can learn. You don't want to take a certification, don't. Just like reading a book, invest time because you're curious about it. If you say, I'm not investing that time, I don't want to invest more than an hour to 2 hours, good enough. From the time that you began searching to the time that you end that search, your knowledge would have increased. Period. In those 2 hours, when you sat down, you knew nothing about AI. When you left, you knew, the total somewhat what AI is, what are the different types of AI. You understood maybe the applications of it. You were curious, so you're in banking, so you found out about how it's applied in banking, and maybe you are a teller or whatever role that you have, right? And in that within that banking community, then you go, oh, I see now how AI is going to help my business. And that's all you want to take for that day because you want to go watch a movie. 3 days later, you're curious and you say, is AI in my personal space? Like you were asking earlier. And then you find, oh, I didn't know that that's powered by AI. Oh, that's what AI powered means.
Yeah.
So you see, at the end of the day, no artificial intelligence has the power of your brain. But the moment you surrender and say, artificial intelligence is smarter than my day-to-day thinking, my day-to-day functioning, what I want from this life, is the day you actually are, the word probably is too strong, you're defeating yourself. And you shouldn't do that because where you're coming is from a place of fear. You're saying, oh my God, my job is going to be taken away. Oh my God, Dr. Sue is far more intelligent than I am. Oh my God, Dr. Bill is far more intelligent than I am. But to your point, where you said earlier, it's a learning opportunity. So to me, it's less about the technicalities of it because there are going to be people who are very smart and they'll go and even innovate and invent, and they're highly, that is what they do, that is what they want to do, and they have fun doing it. But if it's purely for knowledge and improving your knowledge, do it. You don't need to be a guru in that. You don't
Yeah.
even need to know everything about AI. Just know about how it impacts you. If you answer those two questions, I guarantee that over a period of time, you'll want to participate in a conversation by the water cooler. Just like when people talk about sports and you're not into baseball or you're not into football, right? Or you feel that you're culturally different, you feel that your accent is different, you feel that because you're male or female, you're not part of something. Well, if you want to participate and you're curious about it, Google, just listen, express your thoughts and move on. Now you're part of that culture, you're part of that community. And that goes back to what you said earlier: personal, organizational, professional. You are part
So
of that organization.
speaking of professional, that's the next section actually of this first segment is the professional impact, enhancing personal and professional development, right? And providing some examples. Before I ask you about some examples, I have some examples that kind of go to this last question and this question about what they can do. I mean, if you have someone who collects data, for example, it could be a secretary, it could be anybody, it could be an LMS that gives you a Excel CSV file. The data that you collect is very important. People should know that, not just for you, but for AI. So, because when you ask AI to do something, they're going to ask you maybe for the data. Where's it come from? The Excel spreadsheet or from somewhere? And that data that you put into that spreadsheet, if it's I don't want to call it garbage in, garbage out, right? You know, and so even if you don't want to do the high end, AI stuff, I got to tell you, it's very important the data that you input into these databases and Excel spreadsheet. Don't just put garbage in there. For example, in the date column, right? You put date, month, hour, minute, seconds. Now, what is the AI going to do with the hour and the seconds? So I have to clean that stuff. I said, man, you mean you don't have a month column and a date column? So now I have to go in there and manipulate the data and that's maybe one of 30 or 40 or 70 columns of all kinds of stuff you put in there. And so even if you don't want to do the high end, AI stuff, I would submit to you that the job that you do in collecting data is very important. Is very, very important.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better. The collection of data, the verification of that data, which is, I mentioned redundancies, right? Data that is not relevant to the AI model that you're trying to build. However, in the same example that you gave, if you were to turn that for healthcare, it could become very relevant. When was this heart attack? At what time? What was the geolocation? Which attending physician was there? Or what kind of
Yeah.
care was given, right? It becomes extremely important. What kind of medications were given? I know that I cannot give the medication that I'm thinking of giving right now because I have to wait for another 45 minutes because, it could have repercussions. However, in some other areas, it's absolutely redundant. So you have to think about that context. So that's very, very, very important. So I think your question was about professional development. If was that the
Personal,
question?
personal, professional, personal and professional. But even for health, even for healthcare, I have to think predicting cancer. Taking 17, 70 something variables or whatever it may be, and trying to predict whether or not this person is benign or malignant. Right? I could care less about the seconds.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I have
So
enough.
I'll
Yeah.
give you another example. Today, at least in the US, because the US healthcare system is very different from the rest of the world, but even there, you'll see silos. I'm going to a specialist and he or she has my x-ray. Then I'm going to the radiologist, he or she has my x-ray. Then I'm going to the orthopedic surgeon, he or she has my
Okay.
x-ray, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
remember that we're still one person, right? It's
Right.
it's the
Right.
mental and the physical together, right? So one way of putting that all together is to say, can I
Okay.
take all the x-rays for Dr. T and put it all in one spot so that it
Okay.
becomes a central hub, and then the one specialist here who never corresponded with the orthopedic can actually talk to each other, right? Now
Okay.
you mentioned a very, 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 very important point about data, right? That even though you're not in AI, the collection of that data, but remember, in that data collection, there are standards, there's nomenclature, there's
Okay.
terminology. So in data, there's something called metadata management, which is basically,
Okay.
think about it as a pyramid. And then you are creating, as a schema to say all types of disease goes into this. Within disease, all chronic conditions go into this. We have defined chronic conditions to include diabetes, different types of diabetes. So you have different nomenclatures and different classifications. Because when you and I are collecting data, right, what you believe to be, say, should be into accounts payable or whatever,
Okay.
I may not put it in there. So having
Okay.
a common, unified, standard way in which we have a template to say, oh, this is what it all means, instead of taking a wild guess, right, is very important in that data collection and putting it in the right spot and then reducing and eliminating the data that is not relevant to that
Yeah.
model that you're building,
I have
right?
a question later on. I have a question later on about that. Uh, it'll come up, but remind me. I have a question just about that, about collecting a bunch of data, but I don't want to spoil it here now.
Okay.
But I'll say, what industries are seeing the most significant changes due to AI, and what opportunities, right, does this create for professionals in the field, right? What could people probably be talking about? Okay, what do I need to do professional development in, right? So what
Yeah.
industries are seeing
So
some significant
industries,
changes?
banking, manufacturing, supply chain, healthcare. I'm going to predict a lot of it is going to be in energy, utilities. We are building huge data centers across the world, across this universe, in the US and outside. Data centers, think about it as a large Costco. If people know Sam's Club and Costco, it's a large warehouse where instead of storing, 10 million records, now you can store 100 million records. For that, you need
Yeah.
to have electric power. You need to have, data needs to be stored in a certain way. You need liquid cooling. It can't be very heated. So the
I have a
engineering,
question about that too, though.
construction. Go,
I
go
have,
ahead.
I have a question about that too, because it was later on, but since you brought it up now, I guess it's a good time to mention it, right? So yes, all of that. But then now we have these 2030, 2050, you know, um, what is it called? Climate change and all these
Yes.
energy saving footprints for energy usage, and but this all seems to go counter to what you're just saying there, all these data centers and the energy that they're consuming, right? So
Yes.
where is
And
this?
that's what
Where do these curves meet?
exactly. And so they're looking at alternative sources, at how do we make it more sustainable. So this is where people need to start thinking differently. Okay, so exactly
Yeah,
to your
that's a
point, we
niche
have
area.
contradictions, and yet what's happening is, water is going to be the new oil. Water is going to be the commodity in the world. It already is in many parts of the world, right? Sustainability and climate change, we are seeing, glaciers melting, right? What I used to think,
Right,
oh,
right.
I'll wait for another 10 years and then I'll go visit. Now, if I have the resources, I want to go visit because still want to see the Great Barrier Reef. I still want to go to Iceland, and I may still want to go to Alaska,
Mm,
right? So the reality now is, while it's human made, man made, person made, whatever you want to call it, it's only humans who can stem this tide. So think about it, that during the pandemic, what we all did, we were forced by nature, all of us, no matter where we
okay.
were, to sit in our homes and to be
Yeah.
productive, to earn a living. And what happened outside when you started looking? Cities that were extremely polluted, all of a sudden people saw blue skies, right? There was less pollution. So
Okay.
think about it. It was force of nature, and for a period of time, say about 18 months or so 24 months, that worldwide we were able to stem that tide for a little bit. So now my question
Yes.
is, AI or no AI, AI will help you actually hit those spotlights or identify those areas that are extremely dangerous. They're on the verge of breaking. There's no coming back. What can you do today? Right? So when I look at reports around sustainability or climate change, I know that one of the other things is our worldwide population thus far is about 8 billion people. If by 2050 or 2060, we are supposed to get to 10 billion people, 9.8 billion people in the next 25 or
Yeah.
30 years. There are
That's a
also
lot.
reports on the other side that says, because of the climate change, there are going to be countries and places that are just going to submerge and they're going to be no longer in existence. So, one report I read, for example, in the next 50 years, a country like Bangladesh it's not going to exist anymore. So
Well, I
you
know they
see,
don't want to
it's
hear that. They don't want to
no,
hear
no
that,
one
do
wants to be, and I don't want to be the lady of doom and gloom.
they?
I'm just saying that what we did over the years, hundreds of years, we've come to a pinnacle where if we don't take care and sustain and really take this thing seriously in our day-to-day practices, instead of taking a 10-minute shower, I should take a 5-minute shower, right? It's stuff like that. We have to be personally responsible without someone coming in and auditing us to say you can't use your sprinkler for more than 15 minutes per day in summer, which is what they instituted in California for many years now, right?
Yeah, I
So
lived there.
if
I
we
lived
do
there for a
that,
while. Yeah.
yeah. So I think, when you say professional and personal, one of the things that we have to think, which we haven't done perhaps, because we've become a very isolated society, this has the advent of technology, AI is good. On the other hand, we forgot to communicate with each other as human beings. We forgot to think about, what does Dr. Bill need? Right? Can I think beyond Dr. T and my family to think about 5 other people that I may care about? And if I start thinking that way, that I'm part of the
Yeah.
larger economy, large of a community, part of this village, I automatically will help many different things, including, using AI to our advantage, but also
You
thinking more from a social, equitable point of view. Not to
you
mention, I haven't even discussed about equality, inclusion, diversity, because to a lot of
yeah, yeah.
people, that just means race and gender. And it doesn't just
Yeah.
mean race and gender. The inequality of those who have versus those who haven't. Unfortunately, in the world, if you look at it, you can see a clear demarcation by race and by gender. So it's got nothing to do with
Um,
education. Basic things are not available to them, and yet we're going to hold them equally responsible for all the changes that some of us have made in this world, right? And that's not
you
fair.
you you also you keep making me have these flashbacks when you were talking about 5 minute showers instead of 10 minute showers because I was in the military. I was in submarines, and that's exactly we actually knew how many gallons of water we were supposed to use per man per day, right? And so we have to used to have to take different types of showers. You turn on the water, you get wet, turn the shower off, soap up, basically, turn on the water, and get out,
Yeah,
right?
there you go.
Yeah, submarine showers. And if you was to take even a 5 minute shower, when you come out, everybody was going Hollywood, Hollywood. You're taking a Hollywood shower. But we're not asking everybody to take military showers or submarine
No,
showers. But
no.
yeah,
We are just asking people to think if they could, if it's possible, because it may not be possible. People are in crisis. People have all kinds of issues, mental health issues, isolation issues. People are lonely. I was reading something about John Putnam in the late 1990s, early 2000. He
Putnam. Who is
had
that? Who is that?
John Putnam. He is a Harvard professor who wrote about social capital. And
Okay.
there was a time when, irrespective of your ideology, whether you're a Democrat or a Green or whether you are a Republican, people actually did come together and they would have conversations for the larger good of society, for the larger good of the country, right? And
Okay.
John Putnam actually has pictures, and he's a very sober kind of, he's a sociologist, anthropologist, who said one of the things that we are doing, and he predicted what was going to happen in 25 years later, which is where we are. And so he was asked to come back and revise this, is we have become so isolated and so into our own cocoon that we have forgotten the
Ah,
value of what it is to be part of a village.
you make a point which I was going to mention earlier, but I said, nah, I don't want to digress. But since you just came back to that, I think I'm going to mention it because I remember a while ago I read when you were talking about ATM machines, you're talking about automation. Okay. And I was telling you about standing in line to cash my check. See, back in the day, we would go to the grocery shop or the grocery store and we'd stand in line. We'd have to wait. The cashier's on that manual, cashier thing. And we had time to talk to one another. Hey, John. Hi, Bill. How you doing? Socializing. You
Yes.
go to the library, the same thing. You waiting in line. But now you have all this automation. Boom, the lines are clear. Okay.
Yeah.
Socialization, community is less. Now, I don't want to blame it all on automation, but you get the point. Now, everybody can stay at home now. That's part of it. I don't know if you agree with that,
Yeah, no, I agree.
Mr.
But here
Parker.
again, you could convert this actually a negative into a positive. So think about it this way. The repercussions of being isolated, and forget about mental health for a little bit. You talked about retail, you talked about library. We can say automation has allowed us to become very efficient. However, the downside of it is we are not interacting, and because of that, the social isolation, etc., has a health effect or other kinds of effect as well, right? You can take that same thing and now you can create an AI model, and you can say, hey, what are some of the ways in which, by looking at these various survey data, talking to people, and in 2000 we found that social isolation was 20%, but now it's doubled in 25 years, 40%. And here is the impact, financial quality of life impact, blah, 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 on different systems, right? What can my AI model, if I put in certain factors, tell me on how I create, a social environment where people are feeling heard, listened, and acknowledged? That's the genesis of, frankly, free will, free thinking, free speech without
Heard,
interrupting something. You can create those models
heard.
and create a
What'd
space
you
for
say?
that, right?
You say heard, and what are we trying to
I
get
said
to? Being
heard,
heard,
listened, listen,
listen to.
I'm listening. Hearing is not listening.
Okay. All right.
right? Hearing is
Being
not
listened to,
listening. And then
and what else?
adapting to the larger needs of the community. What is the community? If in my community there are 10 people, and 15 years ago, people said, I don't feel socially isolated, maybe 2 out of 10 said that. And now, 20 years later, 6 out of 10 say that. And they're saying, here are the repercussions of being socially isolated. I am mentally depressed. I've been diagnosed for depression. So now I'm taking a medicine. I don't have the financial means to buy these things. So, I have a reduced income. I don't have, the impact
Let
on
me
you
let me
is a
put my
lot.
let me put my data AI hat on for a second, because you tell me what I need to predict, the label, as we might call it, the target. You tell me what I need to predict. So listening and community involvement or community enhancement, listening, community enhancement. If that's my target, okay, in AI terms, I might say, what features or variables do I need to collect to get that,
You go
right?
back to the base. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because the problem is garbage in, garbage out. The things that people are collecting is the problem, right? And this is very important, a very important point. If the target is like feel like I'm listening to, and then maybe community engagement or whatever it is, what things can predict? What variables can predict whether or not that's happening? That would be
Yeah.
an interesting. That would be an
Y-
interesting thing.
So that's why I say history is important, right? So if you go back in time, there was a president of the United States called Theodore Roosevelt, right? Theodore
Okay.
Roosevelt was, I think, a cousin or an uncle of
Amen.
Franklin Roosevelt, right? And he faced a lot of crisis. The day his wife died is the same day that his mother died. His mother died, and within an hour, he heard that his first wife died,
Oh,
right? And
okay.
he had a child, he had a daughter with his first wife. And then he came to the West, he came to Colorado, and that's why he's frankly known in the place. I live in Colorado. And so, now he began something called the National Civic League. And the National Civic League is a genesis
Okay.
of civic
Okay.
engagement. And civic, and what I'm
Okay.
saying is basically a village is a
That's a model. That's a model. You mentioned
exactly,
these. You mentioned the word model.
exactly.
I know people thinking some kind of
Yeah. So
tech thing,
yeah, no,
right?
so it's back to the basics. So when you say, how do I know that, what is the input that I need to have in order to know whether or not I'm making a change in engagement, in civic engagement, in people being happy or people being less, angry or whatever it is. There was a reason why many years ago, decades ago, people felt they belonged. When you are trying to
Okay.
measure something, in this case, one of the things, the key metric that we're trying to say is really a metric of how much whoever you are, how much do you feel that you belong to the communities that you live in? Because the moment you feel you belong and you feel that you're included, two different things, by the way, belonging and inclusion are two different things. I belong doesn't mean I'm included. The moment I say
What do
included,
you mean
I
by
mean,
that? What do you mean
so
by that?
inclusion is I'm heard, people are listening, and people may take an action based on some of the suggestions I am making, right? Inclusion doesn't mean that I'm a token representation in a meeting, in a council, right? I may be the only I'm only a female and person of color, and that's a token representation. But if I belong to that council, but I gave suggestions, and for a period of time, say 3 years, none of my suggestions were ever, you know, um, embedded in the larger policy, on the larger framework, or any procedures. I know that I am not included. I don't feel included in that circle. Eventually, I'll feel I don't belong to that circle also. So I isolate
May
myself. So I'll just finish this one point. So I'll go back to Theodore Roosevelt's model, which was if you
okay.
want to engage in communities, and we very well know that each community
Right.
across America, I'll just use America as an example, the composition is different.
Okay.
People think different, people are of different faiths, etc., etc. But there is a common denominator. And what is that denominator? That you are a citizen of this country. right? So one
Okay.
way of engagement is by saying volunteerism. You don't need to belong to a church or to a synagogue or to a temple or whatever, right? Volunteerism, people are in need. So volunteerism is a
Okay.
very
Yeah.
unique societal attribute or an
Okay.
indicator where even today, to date, as late as 2024, one of the requirements to graduate from high school is the number of hours you have put in volunteering. And it is a word of
Yeah.
honor. There's no auditing here. That is a very, very American concept. That is a one indicator, volunteerism, of civic engagement,
Well,
right? Now, there are multiple
I wouldn't
other
just say
indicators like that.
I wouldn't just say American because you always be making me have these flashbacks. But I think about Sadhguru, right? I'm sure you probably heard
Yeah,
this
yeah,
name
yeah,
before, right?
yeah, yeah.
You know, a guy was talking about he stood up in the audience, asked a question about what should I be doing? What is my purpose? Blah blah. He went on, and our Sadhguru interrupted him. He says, "Man, how arrogant of you to be talking about some higher purpose is right in front of you. You know, where are you? You know, the community, like you were talking about the community that you're in, right? The need, all those things. Your purpose is right in front of you. Stop looking for some greater, grander thing." And it just when you mentioned that, it just kind of had a flashback to some
Yeah,
Sadhguru.
and and so what Theodore Roosevelt did with this National Civic League is he tried to bring communities together, and then over time, what happened is he started giving awards to different communities who are doing sustainability. Someone's doing something for lower income. Someone is creating parks and recreation, whatever, right? So there are these community awards that still exist today, but they're relying on people of those communities. There's no payment per se, it's all volunteerism on the social capital of that community. And so now you're going to
Yeah.
ask me, are there some attributes, or are there some uniform ways in which I can measure social capital, irrespective of whether I'm living in a all black community, an all white community, an all brown community, an all purple community, an LGBT community? It shouldn't matter, because social
I
capital.
would
So,
ask you
what are the
that.
components of the social capital that I can just measure across the board that tells me that this
Before I ask you
communities
that,
are indicate are
before I
happy?
ask you that though, you mentioned a few things that just went right by about some features you mentioned. Right, we're talking about predicting these things, but you actually mentioned about four of them. I think there about social capital. You mentioned what else? You mentioned about four things that can predict the thing features, as I call them. Right, when you were just talking
So,
about it, you mentioned about three or four of them just now.
so I think so, and this is not new. I'm no guru in this, but essentially what I'm saying is the reason I brought Theodore Roosevelt is Theodore Roosevelt's whole premise was about social capital. He didn't phrase it as social
Yeah.
capital. He called it. John Putnam, 100 years later, comes and says, we rely on the communities. If we rely only on government to do things for us, then we are going to be in a sorry state. It doesn't matter which part of the world you are. We have
Agree.
to help each
Agree.
other.
Agree.
In the absence of people now going to churches or faith-based organizations, part of that was a sense of belonging, a sense of inclusion. That now has eroded with time, right? And so where do people feel that they belong, that they feel? Now you can have AI models that you can create, because this has been tested. You can measure it, right? And that's how you know which communities, have very strong bonds. And the strong bond is not that I'm going to have dinner with Dr. Bill in his house with his family every single Saturday. But the bond is that we are there for each other, that we are not waiting for police to be vigilant about any untoward things that happens in my little part of the world, in my little village, in my little township, right? That is part of the social capital, and that social capital exists no matter where you go. So the question is, can I build and reverse this social isolation, the detriment of
That's a good question.
technology, to take advantage of it as well?
That's a good question. And we are. I thought I was going to get through to into segment two, but we are
Oh, we never
actually.
did. Okay.
Yeah, we never actually did. We some of the things we talked about actually are in segment two. You
Okay.
know, but we did cover a lot of that. But we are about out of time, and we will have to actually take this up maybe in another part,
Yeah, let's
right?
do this because I think the more we talk about how AI can help you personally in your personal space professionally, but also the moment you step out of the house, you're part of a larger community, whether you like it or not. You're going to the grocery store, you're part of that community. That grocery store exists within your community, right? And I think
Yeah,
this is all fundamental to us as human beings to say, how can I rewire my brain before I get caught and I'm resistant to this change? Why can't I proactively embrace some of these changes where AI may actually help us, right? And I can be a
yeah,
leader in promoting something within my community to help all of us.
yeah. We'll have to talk about that in the next segment. So I'll have to say, for now, thank you, Dr. Tripathi,
Thank you,
for
Dr.
sharing
Bill.
these invaluable insights on AI and its transformative impact for our listeners. Right, remember that understanding and integrating AI into our personal, professional, and organizational lives can be a powerful step towards staying future ready. You can visit, our website on ciwlearning.net, and also Google me on Dr. Bill 360 for more transformative discussions. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and here's to your 360-degree transformation.
Thank you, Dr. Bill. Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Yeah. So on outtakes, we just talking now informally. So what did you think really about? I had some good ideas about the uses of AI. This thing you talked about with Roosevelt and social experiment. We forgot about all these things, I guess.
Yeah. Exactly. You know why? Because we've been asked to and socialized to compartmentalize ourselves as two separate human beings. One, we have a personal face. Second, we have a professional face, right? The reality is there
Okay.
are no two faces. We are who you are. We are. Second, I'll give you a very concrete example. In healthcare, the way, at least in the US, funding is done is there's funding for mental health and then there's funding for medical health. It's still one person who needs both, maybe, right?
Right,
And the
right, right.
pandemic taught us that, right?
Okay.
Where before the pandemic, the United States government had reduced funding to the point that mental health was bare bones. Today, it has given a lot more because they realize that as long as people are happy, that the cost of keeping the entire population, say 50% of the population is depression, intervening is much more costly than prevention. And this goes back to being
Okay.
isolated. I don't feel I belong. I don't feel I'm being heard. I don't
You
feel
know,
I'm a Black man and I am afraid that. I mean, I know stories of where I have friends who happen to be Black people. I don't go and choose people based on their race or gender. That is not how I was raised by anthropologists' parents. I traveled in the remotest parts of
your
villages,
parents were
stayed with
anthropologists.
them.
Your
Yes,
parents were
yes, my
anthropologists.
and yes, and therefore I was able to blend into any society anywhere. You give me a loaf of bread, I'm fine. You don't give me anything as long as I have water, I'm fine. You
But
get me to
you
a
talked about being
five-star hotel,
isolated.
I'm fine with that too.
You talked about being isolated. Okay, you keep making me have these flashbacks. But when you mention isolation, I keep thinking about. I read an article once about a doctor who was in the AI and robotics, and she was doing research with these old folks' homes, for a better word. Maybe there's a better word for it. Retirement homes. Okay, and they were making, maybe dolphins,
Mhm.
penguins, dogs. They were making these robotics for the elderly, and they would respond. Like if you pet it, they would move, and the robotics, and she'd take data, and if you read her article, I don't remember her name. Maybe I can get it, but she said after a while she's taking data, and she says this is not right, and she was full on robotics before that, but then she was saying those robotics that the elderly are petting and responding to as if they're real. Then she started thinking ethically, that's wrong. They're not real. And some people said, well, it served its purpose. They're not lonely anymore, and it's helping them, to recover. But then she said, no, that's not right. What's happening here? They're not real. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I really don't have an opinion on that because, when it comes to the elderly and depending on the health status of that individual, if you, for example, have Alzheimer's, which eventually turns into dementia, right? It matters little because what you're trying to do is to keep that brain from going full-blown dementia. And one way of doing that is to keep your brain active. So if you're
Okay.
using these kinds of tools, right, that are not real, right, but it's simulated enough where you feel that it's real and it's helping that patient to keep that patient, functional, then absolutely yes, right? So it's the intent. It's real. AI is not bad. AI is very good. But the issue again is not AI. The issue is actually humans because we have ill intent sometimes, and we will use that very same thing to actually destroy the good intent of what we thought AI could do and use it for our own
Okay.
practices. I'm going to do
So,
cyber threat. I'm going to put fake news outside. I'm going to do imagery where you wouldn't, if you're not sophisticated enough, which most of us, frankly, if we're not in the space, how would we know? We'd believe, yeah, Dr. Bill said that. Dr. Bill never said that.
so you make a good point here. I think going back to ethics, though. So the ethics necessarily isn't for the AI. The ethics is for the people. If
Absolutely. Absolutely.
uh
What is the yardstick of human ethics? And no, now you're going to get into freedom of speech. How dare you come up with ethics in healthcare is there. Ethics in the business sense is there. So certain things you and I and the rest of the world just cannot do because we felt like doing it. We can't just go penny pinch and take $1 million out because we had access to $1 million, right? We'd be behind bars. So those kinds of ethic laws and regulations are there in most parts of
right,
the world.
right,
But
right.
other than that, what you and I are talking about, no, there is no ethics because what I believe to be ethical, you may just come to me and say that is not ethical. That is not the definition of ethics. Now we have a fundamental
So
problem
it's not
in
the
how we are
AI.
defining ethics.
So it's necessarily not the AI. The AI is not the villain then.
No, the villain, if there's a villain, it's going to be humans. It's just like saying, I have my data quality is good and I have reduced bias in data. Now, there are many examples. I shall not say, I'm not going to Framingham and I'm not going to how people were duped, 70 years ago into saying you're part of this experiment, and they experimented only on, a subpopulation of the US who had no rights to vote. Black people, right?
Okay.
So you experimented on
Right.
them, Framingham, Massachusetts, right? And many years later, this came to part on things that you should never do, right? On from a scientific point of view. Now you,
Tuskegee experiment. Yeah.
yeah,
Tuskegee experiment.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I think you have to put it in context and you have to say, what is the intent? And then do we have a standard uniform way of understanding, what this means, the nomenclature, again, metadata management. Is this a standard way in which I'm collecting this information? So I shall not name names, but very recently I was in a meeting and they are building a fabulous AI team, large MNC. And so they said,
Okay.
well, we have all of this. Yeah, we have Microsoft and all of that, but we have our own and we are this large MNC and great. And we are assessing, we are taking information and input from these leaders and other folks within the organization. And so my own one and only question was, that's great. If Dr. Bill, Dr. Sue, and just let's make Dr. Smith are part of that data collection process, how do I know that the way these three people are collecting data are uniform enough where within a
Yeah.
standard error rate of say plus or minus two, right? And that's agreeable with a 95% confidence interval that we can say that
Okay.
this is good quality data. And there was pin drop silence. They were talking
I have
about
a
AI
better question.
models,
I have a better question. I have a better
scalability.
question for you.
Yeah.
I have a better question. I have a better question because this kind of was asked to me. I was in a forum where they were talking about AI. After a while, I had to leave, and they used to have it weekly, and I just didn't come back because they could never answer the question about. I said, you're talking about ethics and all this doomsday stuff with AI and all. I said, the first question I would have to ask you is, what is the strategic vision and purpose for which you need to use this? You know, what is the strategic vision and
Bingo.
purpose of the company, right?
Bingo.
No, 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 no. Ethics, but I said, before you even get there, you need to know which direction you're headed in. You 3 years from now, 5 years from, what is the vision first before you start? Because if not, anywhere is fine. Anywhere is fine. And they said, what does that have to do with anything? I don't know why people don't understand that. If you don't have the vision, strategic objectives, headed in some direction, now you can talk about the data you need to get there. Now you can talk about AI helping you get there.
So it's like
You
the
know?
word collaboration, right? On paper, I have all the right leadership, the right talent, and everything else. But what we're doing to ourselves, we're defeating the purpose of actually moving sometimes, I'm not saying all the times, forward. Because it's just like the analogy that I was giving about healthcare, right? If I have a different funding stream for mental health and a different funding stream for medical, and then you know what? Never the twain shall meet. I need to pull this into one resource and say, now coordinate. I don't know how you want to get along with all these family members, but this is the family. Now live with it and make the best potpourri that you can make. And it's as simple as that. The word collaboration should not mean that I've got the C level here and I've got this SVP there. You need a mix of different, people who are technical, non-technical business. And even when it's purely technical, because I have faced this, please, we are not there yet. We'll invite you. We'll invite you after you've done, basic assumptions of hypotheses that I know that sometimes we'll have to go and redraw that whole thing 9 months later. Right? So instead of inviting three more people and hearing from them and listening to them and making them belong and hearing that diversity of thought, which goes way beyond race and gender, which would actually help the client and help you as a business. If I am competing against my peers to get to a target, and we are both competing against the same thing, then,
Okay.
is that healthy competition? It is not
No,
what we did in school, where we all wanted to get A plus. Some of us wanted to be that A1 student, and that was fine in school. But in business, sometimes it could end up being detrimental to the
I think
growth of that business.
I think this is see almost every year. As a matter of fact, I got some emails just the other day to participate in this the Association for Talent Development. Every year they do some best awards and excellence in practice awards as far as all this planning and getting to vision and strategy and all this kind of stuff. But this year, I think I'm not going to do it. It's just too much. But the point here is, what it comes down to is we need leadership, strategic leadership. So one of the first things I look at when I'm sifting through all this data is the message, the briefing, the message that the CEO gave, like in a, let's say, a town hall meeting. What was that vision? What was the pitch in there? Because this sets the tone, leadership as we call it. I remember in the Navy we used to have something called noodle theory. I've mentioned this before. Noodle theory and string theory. Like if you put a piece of noodle on the table and you push on the sides, it's just going to go in and in and in until you take it from the top and pull it, and everything else follows straight behind. That person is the CEO, right? Who sets the tone, and from setting that picture, people can take their cues from. But if you have chaos, the only person you can point to is the CEO, in my opinion, because you
Yeah.
didn't give that.
Yeah, and to some extent, even though people will say, oh my God, she wants everybody to be part of military. If you think about a naval, the Navy, Air Force, or military, armed forces, right? There is discipline for a reason, and there is a reason why you have to surrender yourself, the individual you, for the purposes of the larger team. You will never win war if you say, but I'm a better shooter. I'm a better, captain in the Navy. There's no better, right? The captain is only as good as his or her team is. The same thing with the,
Right, right.
so there is an element and there are consequences. Here is the fundamental difference of being in defense versus, civil society, which is you're fighting for your country, you're preserving the
Mm-hmm.
security of the country, and you are a
Mm-hmm.
collective part of the country, and we value your service, but you are not bigger than the collective we. There
Right,
is no I.
right,
And there are
right.
consequences if you just keep promoting just yourself.
Yes.
In
Right.
the non-defense world, which is most where we live, there is actually a award for, in the pretext of a collective we, the award is given to the I. You see what I'm saying? Because there are no consequences if I
Yeah, yeah.
play a certain game, as long as my team members and I come across, as smart people and getting in the revenue at the cost of someone else, it's okay because that's capitalism, right? So, in one hand, I
Yeah.
understand that. On the other hand, you can't really take the everything that you do on the defense side, but you can take the tenets of what it is to be part of a team, just like in
A
sports.
team.
And that's why
A
you have
team.
a sports leader, a captain of that team, right? And if you are an outstanding person within that team, but you're not the leader, an outstanding team member actually will always think about much more than himself or herself, unless it's a solo sport like golf or
Yeah.
tennis, something like that, right?
Yeah, like in the
Football
Navy, they
or
will ask,
yeah, yeah.
and like I was in the Navy for 23 years. They will ask, so, Commander, what do you think? I said, sir, you really don't want to know what I think. I said, yes, I want to know. I said, no, you don't. He said, yes, I do. And so I would tell him, and he says, well, don't you think? I said, no, sir, I don't think that. You just asked me, what do I think?
Yeah.
And this is what I think. Now, in the U.S. Navy, in military, they will ask. They will
Yeah.
solicit inputs, but the decision is up to them.
Yes,
Okay,
yes, yes. But there's
they
a
will ask.
reason why they're soliciting input because they want to make sure that what they're thinking is the best at that moment in time, the most robust, and before they start executing. Because the intent is to
Right.
execute, the intent is to get the best of the best outcome on behalf, again, of the team, of the country, et cetera, et cetera. I think on paper, that is true. But again, the sports analogy, there are thousand and million, data points where people have written about it, right? A quarterback has a function. When you are going in before it's the second quarter, you're constantly changing formations, right? You're assessing. What are
Right.
you
Right.
doing?
Right.
You're assessing your opponent and you're changing based on that, right? The coach is giving you can take exactly that and apply that in business too, because even with the same client that you believe you know really well, you don't because you don't know what happened to that client that day when that client may have had a dressing down from the CEO of the company saying, where is the $40 million? Why are we behind so much this quarter? You don't know, right? And that sets the
Yeah.
mood. So again, that's part of organizational readiness then, right? And all continuous learning you have to assess.
Yeah.
So various analogies, and there are models that you can create related to that you can start generalizing by industry, size of company, and the same thing you could apply into your social in your personal life too. The issue is always who's going to pay for all of this because this is not inexpensive. And you said something very important. Do I need AI in every single thing that I do? And the answer is no. But what you
Well,
need is
that's a good
understanding
place.
your data.
That sounds like a good place to leave it for the outtakes included, and we'll pick up uh,
Wonderful.
probably next time in the next segment talking about
Yes.
professional organization. Maybe we can get the AI. So I'm
Okay.
gonna
And you'll let me know. And I think you've got it scheduled for whenever, but we can talk offline.